but I didn't, and here we are. I'm Father Moore. I was the vicar here from 2017 to 2019, and then I've been the pastor of Assumption and Bellingham for the last 5 years, and now I'm the pastor of all of Whatcom County for my lifetime. I don't know if it's going to take over at some point, but I'm happy to have you here. We're going to start with prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, we thank you so much for the gift of this Christmas season, for the celebration of your nativity, the celebration of your epiphany, the celebration of your mother, and soon the coming of the celebration of your baptism. We ask you please to inspire us with all of these moments in your life, all of these great acts of salvation. Help us to know your presence in our families, in our communities, in our parishes, in our schools. Help us to know your will in all things, and particularly to help us discern your will when it comes to the education of our children and making sure they are raised well in the faith. We ask you please to bless this conversation this evening as we ask the intercession of your mother and pray, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Amen. Molly, what's my frame of movement? Okay, I'll stay here. The other thing I should mention is we have members of the Skagit Valley Pastoral Council with us this evening. They have to leave by 6:30, so they're going to be here for part of the thing. If you walk out in the middle, it's not because they're mad at me. That would happen earlier in the presentation.
We'll give you those 6:40.
Okay, and I will try to earn that. So, to begin, it's really helpful to ground ourselves in the purpose of Catholic education. We're in a Catholic school right now, so I think many of you here understand the purpose of Catholic education. But why do most people choose a Catholic school? What I hear most of the time when I ask this question is superior academics. Okay, let's talk about that. Yes, this is something that people seek in Catholic education. However, it is an effect. It is a result of what Catholic education is. That is not the basis of Catholic education. The basis of Catholic education, it's an outcome, not a core characteristic. The basis, the core characteristic of Catholic education is that it educates the whole person. We believe that our faith, our connection to Christ, in whose image we are made, helps us understand the whole human person, and we seek to educate the whole human person. The categories that we used in seminary, which I think are very applicable here, are let's start with intellectual. Intellectual, right? We have reason. We are given reason by God. We educate that. There is an aspect here that is educational because we're talking about schools. We want to make sure we increase the intellect of these students. But it doesn't stop there. It starts there. We also teach the spiritual. The Catholic school exists because we believe that the human person is made by God and desires a relationship with God. We exist, we're run by the Catholic Church because we think that it is really helpful and important to educate students in a faith context. And a Catholic school doesn't ignore the spiritual. We don't put it out and say, well, that's not something we're going to talk about. We lean into it and we talk about it and we educate it. We educate the spiritual part of the person. We help them understand faith and their connection to the Lord. Pastoral is a lot of times in a school context what we'll talk about with service. But pastoral is, what does it look like to reach out to and to serve and work with other people? In seminary, we have pastoral education because priests have to work with people. But even in a Catholic school, a pastoral education is, what does it look like for these students to be part of a society, part of a community, and a community that is based in the pastoring of Jesus Christ. The way he pastored, shepherded his people, is what we want to image in our students. And we teach them that, and we train them in that. And then finally, there's human. In seminary, we talk about this as like making sure the priests bathe regularly and show up to their appointments on time, which again, maybe I didn't get that in seminary. But we're trying to help them to be good people, right? It's not just you need to learn stuff. It's not an input-output. it's not just, here's some academic content, but it's how do you grow as a human person? In the context of a Catholic school, usually that's phrased in terms of virtue. You could say morality, you could say morality is part of spiritual, but it's human. What does a well-lived human life look like? What does it look like to be a good and well-adjusted human person? That's part of what we do. That's part of what we are trying to educate people on. And we find it's really important to educate on that. Now, I'm going to put a phrase up here that is going to look a little weird, and then I'm going to explain it. So I just need 30 seconds of your patience. The next thing that is really important about Catholic education that sets us apart from all other schools, not just public schools, but also other private schools, is that as Catholics, we believe that we are sinners in need of salvation. It's a core belief that we come from a place of original sin and that we need a Savior in Jesus Christ. Now, what does that have to do with the school? It's important for a school because it tells us that, as one of my seminary professors put it, nobody is a done muffin, right? We're all still cooking, always. We always need to improve. And that comes into Catholic education because it invites constant improvement. There is a philosophy that you'll see in certain school contexts that every child is a perfect, already polished diamond, and you should preserve every perfect thing about them. That's not very helpful in an educational context. In an educational context, you want to say, this is a wonderful child, but also there's things that can be improved. We're always looking to help children achieve their greatest potential. And that greatest potential means they're not perfect. It means there's a place for them to go. And because we're rooted in the Catholic Church, in the idea that we're sinners in need of salvation, there's always something we can do to improve ourselves, our schools are never complacent with our children. We're always saying there is something that we can do for this child. That's more than just intellectual knowledge, but improvement in human, spiritual, pastoral, or intellectual capacities. The final thing that I'll say, and this is specific in the United States, what I've said so far is true of every Catholic educational context, from your parish CCD program to whatever country you're in. This is true everywhere. The next thing is true in the United States, and that is that we're responsive to market forces. Now, that's not core to Catholic education, but it is a reason to value Catholic education here. Some states have school voucher programs, some states this is less true. But what we found, particularly through the COVID experience, and then a lot of other places, is the fact that we actually have to work to bring people in, the fact that we actually have to justify an $8,000 tuition bill, it keeps us really focused on the quality of the education. We don't have the ability to focus on a lot of other peripheral distractions. We're focused on what do the parents need from us, how can we make that happen? Never sacrificing the above things, right? We wouldn't seek the dollar in order to sacrifice the whole person. We're always going to educate the whole person. We're always going to take these students and help them become their best selves. But it has made Catholic education very effective in the United States that we've been responsive to market forces. As I put in my notes here, the Bellingham School District spends $17,000 a year per student if you don't count buildings. And if you count the capital projects, they spend $24,000 a year per student. That's a lot of money, and yet the Catholic schools, I would say the school that I'm running, I can't speak to ICS, but I assume it's equally competitive, we are doing better on most, if not all, academic metrics, spending half or less of that money per student. We're very responsive to parents. We're very responsive to what we need to do to make sure we're educating our students well. Now, that's why a Catholic school, most of you already understand that because most of you are already dedicated to Catholic education. Why a Catholic high school? Everybody in the Northern Deanery has had these schools since, the 30s? Is that when the school started? The 40s maybe? Yeah, and then, Assumption, that was 1913. We've never had a Catholic high school. We've all had the situation where we go K to 8, and then our kids go to Mount Vernon High School, or they go to Bellingham High School. And we would say, you might have gone through that, fine education, good education. Why bother adding something if we've made this work for so long? Couple benefits. 2 causes, 2 effects. Cause number 1 is what I just talked about. We are trying to teach to the whole person at a very key part in their life. Early education, early elementary education, massively impactful. What the student learns at that point is very important. But then, brain development kicks into overdrive again in high school. And if we want to teach to the whole person at a young age, we also want to teach to the whole person at an intermediate age. Think about all of the changes that you've seen in your own kids or your siblings, whatever age you are, between the ages of 14 and 18. Don't we want the benefits of Catholic education specifically in those ages too? Isn't that helpful? Cause number 2. High schoolers, more than anybody else that I've ever met, maybe middle schoolers, deeply influenced by their peers. K through 5, those kids, whatever the parents tell them, they're like, great, I'll do that. I just want to make my parents happy. You get to the middle school years and they start saying, well, I mean, this person does that. That seems like my friend seems a little more tuned in than my parents. Maybe I'll listen to them. And then in high school, good luck getting them to listen to you at all. It's very helpful to have a peer group at that age, because if they're going to listen more to their peers and to their parents, you really want a group of like-minded individuals. Now, after I made this presentation in Bellingham, there was this question of, does that mean they all have to be Catholic? No. Catholic schools serve all kinds of people. We teach the Catholic faith, but we serve anybody who wants a Catholic education. So when I say like-minded, what I mean is people who are receiving the same kind of formation. If we're teaching to the whole person, particularly that human aspect, that virtue aspect, you want a whole community of people who are equally dedicated to virtue, who are equally dedicated to living into that whole human aspect. And it's really helpful to have a peer group where it's not just people who are getting that at home, but a bunch of people who are also getting that at school together. What are the effects of that? Well, first, we have the thing that matters most to me, which is an effect on the Catholic faith. We see, and I don't have numbers for non-Catholic students, but the Catholic students, there is a statistically significant increase in mass attendance going into adulthood. Now, that's not a great number. 53% is a number I'd still like to be much higher. But when you consider the forces that we're talking with, I suppose, society is secularizing very quickly. The peer pressure right now is not to remain in faith, but to leave faith behind as something that is old or stodgy or unhelpful. So if you're swimming upstream against these forces, going from 40% to 53% is a significant increase. And it's one that does matter. And that's the effect of everything I've talked about. The other effect, superior academics. That's where we start. We really do somehow, with fewer resources, manage to teach kids very effectively. And we see that going through a Catholic high school, which is your immediate preparation for college and the later life, does result in higher graduation rates, and it does result in a better admittance rate to college. Although we're also tuned in very well today that there are plenty of good careers that don't require college. So I've stopped saying like every graduate should go to college. That's not something that I'm holding to. But if they want to, they should have the opportunity. And going through a Catholic high school gives them a better opportunity to go if they'd like. Now, why a Catholic high school here? Well, we have 2 very successful K through 8s associated with our parishes. And I've heard when I was a vicar here, and I've heard as a pastor up in Whatcom County, the deep desire for parents to continue what they've seen so far. They really like our schools. They really like going through here. They don't like having to leave behind a Catholic education system that has worked well for them. And so they've been asking, like parents have been asking because they like it, for these schools. So, we're the only region in the Archdiocese without a Catholic high school at this point. The Olympic Peninsula is a little bit ambiguous. They have a school that is full of only Catholics, but they don't have Archdiocesan recognition, so they can't call themselves Catholic, so it's ambiguous. But everywhere else in the diocese, every other deanery, there are 10 geographical regions of the diocese called the deanery, every other deanery has a Catholic high school except us. We are the last ones to pursue this. Well, we've pursued it. We're the last ones to try to get it off the ground. If every other geographical area of the diocese has a Catholic high school, there's a good chance that we want one too. What they see is what we want, and we've seen it work in the other parts of the Archdiocese. We can see it work here. Two, like I mentioned, we have really excellent feeder schools. We also have private schools and alternative options that have a lot of kids. I just learned Franklin Academy, which is the private school in Bellingham, has twice as many students as my school. I had no idea. I thought they were equal with the Catholic school, but no, they have twice as many students. There is a hunger for these alternative education options, and we want to provide that opportunity for all those who want it. Finally, the parents have expressed this to me for many years, and when we did a survey, it's hard to get people to fill out a survey, particularly one that's going to take, I think half an hour sometimes, these surveys. 342 families of school-aged children express an interest. We know that there's interest out there. And if there's interest, and we think we have a product that's worth it, educating the whole person, teaching the Catholic faith, we want to make sure that opportunity is there. Now, we've done some work, and I'm going to tell you the work that we've done in a second, but before I go into that, I want to tell you this specific piece of work that we've done. We have a steering committee running, I'll talk more about them in a second, and that steering committee got together and we said, what's the mission of the school? We know we want a Catholic high school, but that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. Can we be deliberate about what that means to us? And we came up with this mission statement. Every word here is deliberately chosen. The first is to inspire learners. We toured other schools in the Archdiocese. One of them was Seton Catholic down in Vancouver. I'm very impressed with them. We'll talk about them later in the presentation. But one of the things that Seton said is their culture was really important to them from the beginning, and they do a cultural interview with everybody to make sure that the students and the parents coming in match the culture so they can preserve the culture that they really care about. For them, the thing that they were selecting on was basically students who are open to faith. They didn't want a 14-year-old sitting in the back of their weekly mass, arms crossed, rolling his eyes, I don't want to be here, this is stupid. Because it takes everybody else down. They don't have to be Catholic, but they have to be at least open to what Seton is doing, open to faith. So when we were talking about that for this school, the word that we came upon was inspire, intentionally using this word, that comes from the Latin word for fill with the Spirit. So we're inspiring, Holy Spirit based. Inspire learners. We want students who are interested in learning. And that was one of the characteristics we wanted to select on, was a student who is open and curious and willing to learn. Inspired to do what? First was encounter Christ. It's a Catholic school. We can do a lot of things in a private school, but if the church is going to spend resources, we want to make sure that it is Christ-centered first. So these learners, we want them to encounter Christ. Now, again, what does encounter mean? We're going to do our best to define that as we continue to develop this project. But we want them to encounter Christ. We want them to know who Christ is and have an experience of the person of Jesus so that, should they be open to it, they might reciprocate that relationship. Second, we want them to critically engage important ideas. This is that learner's bit. We want to make sure that the most important ideas that we have in humanity, the things that we think people need to know to be a well-educated human person, that they are engaging those ideas and critically engaging. That they're exposed and they're taught, okay, how do I deal with all of these ideas that humanity has had for 4,000 years of written history and philosophy? How do I deal with that? How do I engage with that? We want to teach our students how to do that and to give them that exposure that allows them to do it. And then finally, we want them to apply their gifts for the good of the world. This is that service aspect that a lot of us talk about in Catholic education. We're giving you this gift of the whole person education. We're helping you engage with these ideas. We're having you encounter Christ. But if you do that and turn in on yourself and just hold it for yourself, that selfishness doesn't fit our mission. Right? Our mission is to have them apply everything that they've been given for the good of the world. That might be through evangelization. That might be through social services. That might be through being the next great inventor or philosopher. Whatever it is for others, not just for ourselves. We stand by this mission because we think it really helps define what we're trying to do, and it gives some flesh to the bones. Not all of the flesh, that's why we have steering committees, and we'll talk about that later, but some of the flesh of these are the principles that we really want to hold too strong. All right, what have we done so far? Well, and as long as he's in the room, I have to blame him. I never thought about a Catholic high school until I worked for Father Tom. And he mentioned it, I think it offhand in a conversation, and I've never been able to forget it. Like, I've just been obsessed since he mentioned it. And so even before I left the Skagit Valley 5.5 years ago, I was thinking, like, what would this look like? How can we make it happen? And pretty quickly after that, we wrote a letter to the Archbishop asking for his permission to begin investigating this. That was in November 2019, so the Archbishop had a lot of things on his mind starting in about March 2020. So we didn't hear from him for 2 years, but then after that we approached him again, we got his permission, and then with the help of Bridget Ravala, who was on the Archdiocesan School Board, we began to start making progress. We put together a steering committee. So we have authorization to do this research by 2023, and then we kick it off with a steering committee and an advisory council. Just all the people I had been talking to informally, some people Bridget knew, some people recommended to us by Father Mignano and others. Just, what's this thing going to look like? Let's talk about it. Let's get it going. We started to put structure to it. We began researching, and we said we need a lot more information. And we started talking to the Archdiocese and the superintendent, and they said, look, you really need to do a study. And so he tells us what we need to do, the superintendent. And then we conduct a feasibility study with a national organization called Meitler. They exist only to do feasibility studies for Catholic schools. This is their wheelhouse, this is what they do. Some of you will have filled out a survey that went to Meitler, they crunched the data, and they gave us some results from that. We choose Meitler, we do the survey, we get 600 responses, they present the results to the committee. Phase 1 is complete. When Meitler presents the results, they always give you a decision point. They say, this is what we think is going to be true. Do you want to proceed or not? We investigated 2 locations. What would this look like if we put it in Burlington? What would this look like if we put it in Bellingham? We wanted parents to weigh in on both of those. We asked parents to weigh in on different tuition levels to report their income. We did demographic research. What's the median income in Skagit County? What's the median income in Whatcom County? All of this together suggested that we were going to have somewhere between 28 and 31 students in our first class. Meitler says that's about the number of students you might be able to expect at the tuition level that we're thinking, at the different locations that we're thinking. And we said, okay, that's hard. It's not easy. For a sustainable school, and we'll talk about what that looks like, for a sustainable school, you need a certain number of students over a certain number of years. 28 to 31 is like right on the edge of, can we pull this off? Is this a worthwhile high school experience? We decided as a steering committee that yes, it was still worth it. Everything I talked about, why Catholic school, why Catholic high school, why Catholic high school here, that was all true. And there was a path to a sustainable experience that achieved all the things we wanted to achieve. It was just a hard path. But we decided we wanted to walk it. Bringing us to phase 2. If we're going to do this, what do we still have to do? Well, we have to get a bunch of people together. We have to create a budget. We have to figure out what is necessary, who do we have to hire, where can we do buildings. And that's kind of where we're at, and that's what this presentation is part of. So we're putting together subcommittees on property, finance, and fundraising, because those are the first things that you have to figure out to pull this thing off. We're doing research in those subcommittees to figure out what we can do, where we can build, how much money we need. Once we establish a startup budget and a location, then we can move forward. So we have to determine those things. And this is where we're at. We're in this research phase right now. We're trying to figure out how to make these decisions on location and budget. After that, phase 2 is complete, and then you move into fundraising, basically. In order to determine the decision points, we decided, okay, let's list the things that have to be done 2 years before we can open, and 1 year before we can open, and 6 months before we can open. So 2 years before opening, we have to fundraise, we have to determine the curriculum. Because to do all of that, that's a lot of runway that you need. In order to raise all the money you need a year and a half or 2 years. Curriculum is also necessary because that determines who you're hiring, and hiring takes quite a lot of time, particularly for a new school. 1 year out, we want to secure final archdiocesan approval. We've been working with the superintendent, so nothing that we are doing is unknown by or unapproved by the chancery. But the chancery has the final say, so we have to submit a final document with all of the decisions we've made, and they have to give final approval to that. So that needs to happen about 1 year out, because that's still enough runway where we could stop the plane before it takes off, and the archdiocese doesn't want its hand forced. They need the freedom to say yes or no. We also have to recruit startup families. We have to make sure that we have a governing commission in place, whether that's a school commission model like is here at ICRS, or whether that's a governing board that's determined by certain decisions we have to make. And we have to hire a principal. And then 6 to 12 months out, once we have that principal, we're hiring staff, we're making sure the building is ready to go, we're making sure we have books, we're making sure we have desks, doing all of the necessary things to actually just start and run a school. Now, I mentioned that Archdiocesan report. This is where we're at, and this is where we need the most help right now. What is in the Archdiocesan report? Well, they want demographics. Done. Paid for it. Meitler took care of it. I should say, the Meitler study was not cheap. It was about $50,000 to $60,000 all told. We were helped out by the Fulcrum Foundation. Celebration of Light is this month, so, talk to your pastor if you want to go. Fulcrum Foundation gave about half the money we needed, and the Ferry Foundation, which is a foundation very connected to Fulcrum, gave us about half of what we needed. So we want to give them the recognition for helping us get that demographics done. They want to survey local families, did that with Meitler. We're still missing location and facilities proposals. We have a subcommittee, we're working on it, but you have to give the diocese the data that says, we looked into it, this is how much it's going to cost, there's no asbestos, or if there is asbestos, we figured out how to deal with it. You have to do all of that work. You have to do the work of proposing a curriculum. Obviously, the Archbishop is just as invested as we are in making sure our kids receive a Catholic education, and he has the final say. So we have to tell them what we're going to teach and how. That's both for state recognition, but it's also for archdiocesan recognition. We have to figure out how we're going to be governed. There are two ways you can do a school like this. You can start it as a separate independent 501c3, and then it has a governing board, and you have to create the document, and you have to make sure that you have defined how it's run. Or you can expand an already existing school. Basically add 9th through 12th grades to ICRS, or add 9th through 12th grades to Assumption School. Doesn't mean it has to be in the same building, doesn't mean it has to be in the same city necessarily, but it would be more of a run by the local pastor, just like the K through 8 school is sort of model. So we're working that in the steering committee as well, but we have to tell the diocese what we're going to do. And then we have to have a financial model to prove that this is sustainable, that we know where the money is going to come from. We have to tell them, we're going to raise this much money so that we have this much of a runway so that we can make this happen. And they have to check our math to make sure we're not doing something stupid that's going to hurt our parishioners and hurt our students. If you would like to help, we have committees working on this. We have a finance committee, we have a development committee, we have a property committee. And then we might, in the future, these are not as urgent, have a curriculum, a personnel, and a student life committee. Now, if you've been on the steering committee at all, if you have helped with any of these things and you're in the room tonight, can you stand so that people can recognize you, so they can see who's already working on this? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if you have questions about what it looks like to serve on these committees, Armando.
It's Anna too.
Yeah. Ask these folks, right? They're the people that you want to see, they're the people you want to talk to because they've been doing this work with us. Now, I think I have 2 more points and then I'm done. So I know I'm almost losing the pastoral council, but this is probably the big thing you need to hear now. One of the reasons we're talking to you now, at this stage, it is not yet approved by the Archdiocese. We have not done any funding. This is not a fundraising meeting. Is because we need your help on those subcommittees. In order for this thing to open, there's just a lot of work that has to happen, a lot of research that needs to be done, and we need expertise. So we need people on those subcommittees. The other reason we're doing it now is we really need people to discern if they are willing to be a startup family. Brightest, rosiest projection about getting all this work done, we're aiming to open in fall 2026. That's the ideal. That's what we want, is fall 2026. But to do that, we need a ton of people on a ton of committees making a ton of reports that we can get into the Archdiocese by fall 2025, which is only a couple months from now, because we need that year runway. But we also need startup families. So if you think, how old are the kids in my life? What grades are they in? What grade are they going to enter in fall 2026 or fall 2027? Those groups will be our first people. They'll be our first classes. And we need people to ask themselves, are they willing to take a risk to start a school? I can speak to that personally. The university that I went to, when I accepted it, when I said I was going to go, was not accredited. Because the way it works on the university level is you have to graduate a class before you can prove that you can graduate a class. So the first 4 classes of the university, they're promised that eventually their degree will be accredited, but it can't be accredited until they actually go through the school. So I went to a startup university. I was the 5th graduating class, so I wasn't as risky as these earliest classes, but I know what it's like to be at a startup institution. It was 300 students over the course of the whole student body. My graduating class, I think, was 89. Might have been lower than that. I was part of rewriting the curriculum. I was generation 2, right? The 5th class kind of starts the cycle over again. Rewriting the curriculum, working with the professors, being part of the startup culture, claiming the student culture, helping do all of that. And I can tell you, it was an incredible experience. I could have gone to Columbia, I got in. I could have gone to Rice in Texas, that was my second choice. Rice is an incredible institution with incredible student life. But I ended up going to Olin, which none of you have heard of, because it was such an incredible opportunity. I knew I was going to experience things at Olin as a startup incubator for engineering education that I was not going to experience anywhere else. And I said, I want what's unique. If I can go anywhere I want to go where it's unique, where I can say, I got this and nobody else got to do this. And I can tell you, having done that, I am such a better person today because of this startup experience in my university. My professors, when I got there, treated me very much like a peer. Not in knowledge, they had the PhDs, right, obviously, but as a co-partner in starting and running this school. They really worked collaboratively with the students. You do that a little differently with a 14-year-old than an 18-year-old, but it's not that much different, right? You work more with the parents on the high school level than you do on the university level. But even so, being part of that and taking ownership of my school really taught me to take ownership of every part of my life. It taught me that I was a valuable contributor, and it taught me that I needed to participate for something to be successful. What we hope for our startup families, because it is a risk, we're going to make sure your kids get educated, but it's still, you don't know what you're getting into. What we hope is that you feel that same ownership. In fact, there are 3 characteristics I want to highlight. The first is excellence. As a startup family, you get to determine what the school looks like, right? Are we going to have a debate team? Well, that depends on whether the first families want a debate team, right? What are we going to do? What's it going to look like? How are we going to teach? Because everything is new, you also have the ability to change in mid-course. You get to October or November and you say, this isn't working. Well, there are only 26 kids. There are only 26 families. Fine. Let's get together, have a meeting, and fix it. My university was so small because we wanted to be responsive to change all the time. And if you only have 80 kids in your university class, you can change things pretty quick. Hopefully, the investment of parents and teachers allows us to be excellent because we are responsive to what you are telling us your kids need. Second is ownership. This is the most important thing for me having gone to a startup university. I own the things that I do. I take responsibility for the things that I do, and I am very comfortable with responsibility because I was given that responsibility very early at a very key part in my life. Our hope is that these students will take that same responsibility. And then finally, community. You take on a project together, you do something interesting and new together, you're going to get really close to each other really fast. We hope that our students undertaking this really interesting opportunity will have a deep community, and we hope the same is true for their parents, that this is a group project and you feel like you're an equal partner in that project. All right, if the pastoral council needs to leave, this is a good transition.
Thank you. So, pastoral council members, we're going to head over to the pastoral center for our meeting. Thank you all.
Now, for the rest of you, we're not done. I still have more points, but these are points that they could skip if they needed to. Who do we want to be? Where are we hoping to go? Two model high schools that we might think about. So, one, Archbishop Murphy is the nearest Catholic high school. And I was at a meeting recently where I pulled up a map, and some people at the meeting said it was really striking to see the map. If you pull up a map of the northern deanery, and I was sitting in Bellingham, so I highlighted Bellingham, and then you put a pin in where Archbishop Murphy is, 1/3 of the state of Washington is excluded. Like, we are a sizable place, and Murphy is in South Everett. If you had to get to Murphy from here, you know you're driving through all of Everett. Basically, it's in Mill Creek. It's a mess, and let alone Whatcom County. It's really hard to get there. But it's close, and some of you, particularly in the Skagit Valley, will have experience, because I know there are people who live just south of here. Stanwood people will sometimes send to Murphy. Every now and again, you'll get a Mount Vernon person going to Murphy. So we look at them and we say, that's a successful Catholic high school. We want to look at what they are. However, they're a little bit larger than we think we can pull off, because they're pulling from North Seattle and Everett, which are two huge population centers in the state. Bellingham and Mount Vernon aren't small, but they're not North Seattle and Everett. Seton is a little bit more our speed, and we tour them. They're down in Vancouver. It's hard to get there. I actually took a bus, like a 5-hour bus ride from Bellingham to Vancouver, because it was, but Seton is one of the newest Archdiocese Catholic schools, started I think about 20 years ago. About 20 years ago. They have 300 students. That's where they kind of leveled off, between 250 and 300 students. And I can tell you, I was deeply impressed by what I saw. The results of everything I said about the startup culture, you can't be a startup forever, continued in Seton. They were able to take a culture that they built early on and continue. When I was there, they had weekly Mass, which you never see at a Catholic high school. You usually see it only for holy days of obligation. They had weekly Mass, the whole student body was together. The place felt like a Catholic school. Looking around the students, they looked like they were in a Catholic school. These were respectful students. They clearly took their academics seriously. They seemed to have a good student culture. I was very impressed. When I think about what I want our high school to be up here, I think about Seton Catholic. And if you're curious, they will probably give you a tour. They were very happy to tour us around. They were like, nobody pays attention to us because we're in Vancouver. And I'm like, I know what that's like. I'm in Bellingham, like opposite sides of the diocese, not Seattle. I get it. But that's kind of where we're headed. That's what we think the size would be if we stabilize. That's kind of where we're looking to. We have models. We're talking to their founding principals, their founding presidents. We're asking how they did it. We have good support around us to help us figure out how to do this. Seton is also financially viable. I mean, they've built, you're looking at a brand new campus. They managed to build a brand new campus. We'll talk about what that looks like with us for a second, but built a brand new campus. They're successful. They have revenue that matches their expenses. They're doing great. Now, that's where we're headed. How do we get there? We made a decision after phase 1 into phase 2 a little bit that we did not want to do what certain other Catholic schools around the country have done. And we talked to those schools, and that's why we realized we didn't want to do it. One approach to a Catholic school is to say, we need a brand new campus, we want 300 students right away, we want all of these people, so we are going to fundraise $30 million to begin with, and then we're just going to build a campus, and if we build a campus, they will come. What we decided is we wanted to prove that the school was going to be successful before we overextended our reach. Which is to say, to actually open a school, what you need is students, faculty, and a location. And that's actually pretty simple. You can find a building. Not a brand new building, not a custom-built building. But you can find a building, particularly your first couple of years where you only have one classroom at a time. You don't need a lot of space. It's harder to find the personnel, but you can find them. You can find a principal, and you can find teachers who are willing to be part of the startup experience. And then you can find startup families. You can find students who are willing to take this risk and to make this happen. Those three together could happen in 2 years. That's why we're focused on fall 2026. You can do it if we have enough investment from our local community, if we can get these subcommittees going. We could do it. And again, if the Archbishop approves. It always goes back to him. He always has the ability to say this is a good idea, this is a bad idea. But we figured we should do that first because then we will better understand what our families are, what our experience is, where we want to go. Spending $30 million now on something that you don't understand doesn't make sense. Spending $1.5 million on a building renovation and some early startup capital to figure out what kind of families are attracted to your school, what kind of culture those families are going to develop, and what this Catholic school experience is going to look like, that makes a lot more sense. And so when we're planning the first couple of years, we're planning on a startup model school. It's a little bit stripped down. We don't have 300 students in the building. We'll start with maybe 25. And then the next year, maybe it's 50 in the building, right? 75, 100. You're building up over time. So when we picture what this looks like for a startup family, it doesn't look like a direct competitor to Mount Vernon High School. It looks like a small community of people dedicated to a Catholic education, doing this together, and developing as much of a high school experience as we can possibly give them. I cannot give you a football team in the first year. In fact, both of those schools, Seton and Murphy both, they talk about what they were and were not able to do with sports. Murphy is really interesting. They were a very small school to begin with as well, and then there was some retiring football coach that was super famous in the area at the time. They hired him, like, hey, do you want to try to start a football team? We think we have enough students now. And he won a state championship within 2 years. And that boosted their population from 250 students to 600 students in 2 years. Something happened. That could happen to us, but it's not how we begin, right? We begin with the core of the Catholic education, educating the whole person, trying to make sure that these students are given the great benefit of the school, and then giving them whatever opportunities besides. Seton, I don't think they can field a football team, but they have a soccer team, right? You can often field that, do they?
Actually, Seton went to the state championship in football this year.
Did they? All right, so maybe they're about to go to 600 students too. We'll learn. But a lot of times these schools, they start with certain sports that you can do at a very small scale, and then they rely on the local public schools for other enrichment opportunities, for the larger opportunities. We have looked at the Washington state law. We have confirmed that as long as it is not offered at our school, students can enroll. What we have to confirm is whether every student at the school can enroll at the nearest high school, or whether students have to enroll at the high school in which they live. That's ambiguous in the law, and I have to check with some lawyers and some other schools that have figured it out. But those opportunities are available. We're still figuring that out, but they are available. But it's not available on campus necessarily. What we do want to offer, you can see the check boxes, we want to offer college prep level academics. You can do that right away with a small number of students. Sometimes you can do it better because in the early years, it's a very tight-knit community. You know what everybody needs. We want to offer community service. You can do that. We're Catholic. Again, that mission statement, we're going to apply it for the sake of the world. Offer individual sports and extracurriculars. I did debate in high school, which I was telling Molly or Bridget or somebody, if you do debate, you just plan on being lonely in high school. My high school was 900 students. My debate team was 5 kids. So you can do certain things because you want to. And then other extracurriculars, we're going to partner with our local high schools to make sure that our students have access to whatever they want. I was huge into band in high school. I would be hard-pressed not to do band when I went from 8th grade to high school. It would have been nice to know that I could have joined the local band or find some sort of enrichment opportunity there. Fine arts, we're still figuring out what you can offer locally, what you can't. And then student clubs, again, responsive to the students who are there. Whatever they want to do, we're going to find a way to do it. That's what we're doing. This was a disappointment to some of the parents I presented to in Bellingham. They want to start out with the full high school experience. We just want to be very honest with you that it's not something we can do right away. The startup families that we're looking for are the ones who really value the core of Catholic education and are willing to partner with us for the rest. Ideally, we will build up to 75 a class, which is 300 for the whole school. We'll be able to do what Seton did, maybe state championship, whatever, right? Like, no promises, maybe, right? But we want to develop the community, develop the curriculum, develop the school first before we focus on the tangential aspects. Next steps, final points. We would love for you to sign up. If you have expertise that can help us, particularly in finance, fundraising, or property, we want to hear from you. But also, if you're interested and you don't have those skills, but you just want to help and you write a good report, we can use you. We can use anybody. We will try to find a way to bring you in. Molly has the sign-up sheet. Talk to her. You can reach out to Sarah Rutherford. We're trying to keep Sarah and Father Tom in the loop on everything that we do because we need partners. We need to be partnering between Whatcom and Skagit. This will only succeed if both major population centers work together. Right? If we did it and focused only on Whatcom, I think I might get 15 students. If we focused only on Mount Vernon, again, maybe 15 students. Working together, we want to make sure that we can pull this thing off. And so we're trying to be partners. Talk to Father Tom, talk to Sarah, and then if they don't have the answer, they'll refer up to the steering committee, somebody there. We also have a website where we try to post updates and information, ndhighschool.org. Always helpful to know where the website is. And we're going to try to do a better job of putting updates in parish bulletins and other parish communication mechanisms. So look for blurbs in your parish bulletin or in your school bulletins. That is the presentation. So at this point, it is open conversation. Any questions you might have, I'm happy to field. Anything else that you might like to know, anything else you'd like to say. I will end the streaming so that you can feel a little bit more free to do that.